Yes. Selection part 2, let's get it. Yo, what's good? It's your boy Premier. So in the last section, we discussed the two different selection constructs. But before I show you how to implement those bad boys, let me introduce something to you called logical operators. Sometimes, yeah, an expression on its own is just way too vague. Like, for example, not too long ago, my hair was long and it looked like shit. Just pre some of my last videos. But anyways, it was long, yeah? And there are periods where I transitioned between different hair utensils. Utensils, what the f? Anyways, I had to choose between a brush and a comb. So, imagine my hair long again, yeah? And I had to make a decision between which equipment I would use. I have to choose between these three. Now, if I use an if statement to make this selection, I could say, if my hair is long, choose a comb. And then another if within it, which says, if hair is afro length, then choose afro comb, which is fine. But I could use logical operators to decide in just one if statement. These right here are logical operators. Logical not, logical and logical or. You see, not is when you want to test the inverse of expression. Whatever expression you see there, if there's a not in front of it, then think the complete opposite. Logical and is used for combining expressions. If this is true and that is true and that is true, and so on. But if one of them is not true, then the whole expression is false. And lastly, logical or. It's similar to and, in which it combines expressions. But if one is false, it doesn't matter. As long as one expression is true, then it's calm. So going back to the comb example, yeah, I can now express wanting to use an afro comb like, if hair is long and hair is in afro, then use afro comb. Yeah, I know that analogy was weird, but whatever, man, it's my video. Anyways, let me show you how to get it down in code. Alright, so I created a basic program demonstrating both if statements and switch statements. So let's start with the if section. So here I ask for a number from the user, and then here I test the value that's given from the user and react accordingly depending what value is stored. Now, if the input is greater than 10, I will output the message accordingly. Cool. In the next statement, I use logical and to combine two expressions. If the input is greater than 5, and if the input is less than 8, then output a message accordingly. Remember, if one of the expressions that are combined with logical and is false, then the whole statement is false. Next, I do a similar thing with logical or. If the number is 9, or if the number is 5, then output the message accordingly. And lastly, for any values that don't fall into any of these categories, then output this message. Pretty simple. Let's run it and see what I go on. Cool, so let's input 100. Dope, it hits the first if clause and passes, outputting the message that is greater than 10. So next, let's try with 7. Cool, so it's greater than 5 and it's less than 8, so it outputs this message. Now let's input the number 9. It hits the third if clause and the first expression is true, therefore outputting this message. And lastly, let's try with a number that doesn't hit any of these clauses. Sound. It hits the else clause and then outputs the message accordingly. Note that if statement clauses are tested in order. So the less than 10 one is tested first, then the greater than 5 and less than 8 one is tested, and so on. Now, if you have something that passes multiple if clauses, the first one it tests and passes is executed. Then after, I carry on with the program from after the whole if statement. Now, if you don't want that to happen and you want it to execute both of these if statements, you need to make two separate if statements and don't else if them. Okay, chillin'. So let's move on to the switch statement. Here, once again I get input from the user, this time a character. But before I even start though, remember, you can only switch integers, characters and enumerators. Anyways, so now switch the variable. And I have multiple tests. Remember, switch statements only test equality against constant expressions. Now, the first test case tests to see if the value within the variable is equal to the value capital T. Also remember to always put a break statement at the end of your switch clauses. This makes the program jump to the end of the switch statement and then carry on with the rest of the program. If you don't, it will carry on with the switch, which, if it's not intentional, can be detrimental to you. Now, the next clause has 3 cases which will result in the same result. Pretty sound. The second from last test is pretty similar to the first one, except that it's testing against a lowercase l. And lastly, the default. This is like the else clause in if statements. It's true for anything other than the things that are tested above. Okay, cool. So let's test this out too. So say I enter capital T. It hits the first clause and then reacts accordingly. It then ignores the rest and finishes the program. Next, let's try R. It hits the third clause and then reacts accordingly as a result. The same would have happened if I inputted O or E too. Now let's input put L, it hits the last case clause and reacts accordingly. Now, if I enter a random character that's unrelated, it hits the default clause, all as expected. Pretty dope. So that's it regarding selection really. Pretty basic but powerful stuff. This is the bread and butter of computer programming. Okay, bless. So next episode we'll do some exercises to help drill in these concepts. Have fun, keep pushing, see you man next episode. Peace.